What kind of providence?
Well, yesterday I got in a car wreck. I and it was my
Wait,
fault.
after I talked to you?
No, it was before I talked to you.
Wait,
I was
so what? Okay.
I was sitting on the couch waiting for the Advil to kick in when you called yesterday.
So you
So
had gotten in an accident yesterday before you spoke to me, and you didn't tell me yesterday that you were in a car accident?
no, man, you had good news, so I didn't want to ruin it. But then
Oh
this
my
morning, so
goodness.
I was driving Zori's car yesterday because somebody broke into my truck and broke the window, and so I,
Wait, that happened
I was
yesterday
like, I'll
too.
just no, that happened last weekend, and so I was, so I thankfully I wasn't going fast, and the sun was in my eyes, and so I had my hand up trying to shield the sun, and I covered the red light, and I ran it, and but I was only going about 15 miles an hour, and anyways, it was just dumb error. So this morning though, I had to drive my truck with the broken out window to the
Oh,
worship team meeting. It's really cold, drive all the way down there and go in. And then I realized, oh shoot, I had my earbuds in, but I had left the little case charged, plugged in to charge. Somebody reached through the broken window and stole it. The empty AirPods case. So they simultaneously got nothing and made my earbuds. I've got one charge left, so we'll see if they last all the way through our podcast today.
and here I'm
uh,
thinking like, oh, you took your earbuds out, and J. Cole was playing in the middle of the worship because you didn't have your case or something.
no, that would be funny. I was listening to J. Cole yesterday. Um,
Did you see the video I sent you with J. Cole? What
oh
happened? The
yeah, that was
YouTuber?
amazing.
Okay, I gotta
That was
explain this.
incredible.
So J. Cole is a hip hop artist. He's looking for um, beats. He's writing a new album, I guess, of some sort. He's looking for tracks, and when you're in J. Cole's position, you got every well-known producer out there who hands you music. You're not ever hurting for options of music. But because everybody knows what a platinum song sounds like after a period of time, all the producers gravitate towards that universe. They all start sounding the same, using the same instruments, producing the same rhythms, and using the same tempos. And so it's hard to find something after you make it that inspires you, because everybody's trying to get a platinum song. When you were making music, platinum music is what comes out of a desire to really speak your heart, right? So you're not necessarily, you want to get there to the place you get platinum, but that's the drive, is the art and the expression. After you get to where J. Cole is, it's like you got to have another platinum record because you got bills to, you got to make
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And so you don't get inspired the same way anymore. And so J. Cole
Yeah.
basically
That's
had
how
listened
MC
to,
Hammer ends up. That's how MC Hammer ends up making pumps and a bumps, where he's like, I just got to hit it again,
yep,
and
yep,
you get some trash
pumps and a bump, pumps and a bump.
pumps and a
You know,
bump.
yeah, and it's yeah. So all artists play that game. I was thinking of somebody who didn't do that, and I think it was Jay-Z, hip hop artist, the only hip hop artist I know
Well,
that's been.
Kanye too. He would always,
Yeah, fair
yeah,
enough, fair
each
enough.
album would be new, and everybody would be like, "What the heck? What's 808s and
Remember
Heartbreaks?"
80,
Like,
bro?
yeah, great album, but everybody was like, "What are you even thinking?" Then the next thing you know, the whole next
Everybody
generation of
sounds
albums
like
sounds
808.
just like it, right? So he's always pushing the edges. But yeah, you're right. Jay-Z, I mean, he has all that Beyonce money, so he might not worry about it quite as much. All that champagne money.
Yeah. So J. Cole, yeah, you're right. I ain't question about that. He ain't really worried about it. He gets to stay in surviving, starving artist mode because Beyonce is so
Yeah,
far ahead of him.
right.
Um, so J. Cole is looking for inspiration, and he goes and says, "Man, I've listened to all this music. Let me just go on YouTube. YouTube. type in J. Cole style beat. And this
Right.
cat had, I mean, and people do that. They'll go and produce music that nobody's ever heard of, and they'll live in their little corner with like 350 subscribers or maybe 15 subscribers, and they'll put the little tracks on there. And he types in J. Cole type beat, finds this artist. First one that pops up is this track, and then he plays. He's like, "Oh man, that's inspiring me." And J. Cole writes for like 2 minutes and 25 seconds, just off the top of the dome, what that beat made him think. And usually, though, you have to go through a certain amount of tracks before, as a producer in music, and somebody does music, you have to go through a certain amount of tracks before you get the stuff that's hot. And so you'll have a
Right.
library of music that you just produced that was inspiring you, that you needed, to make other stuff. And that stuff never makes it out the vault.
Right.
What J. Cole did was give it to this YouTuber and said, "Hey, here goes. Let me bless you. Take this track. This is something that'll stay in the vault normally. And I don't want to do that because you out here, you inspired me. And so here, take this beat. It's yours." And the cat, what was it, like 2.7 million views?
Yeah.
It went
just blew this guy's career through the roof.
it was it went platinum almost 3 times.
Right.
Right. So
It
the
will
song
be
went
platinum a third time any day now, I'm sure.
Absolutely. When more people feel,
Because
I
it's
found
incredible.
out. Yeah. Well, okay. I thought it was, yeah, it's incredible because J. Cole really spoke his heart on that one.
Yeah.
Right. He said,
I mean,
I'm up
poetically
here.
speaking, it's fantastic. It's not a fully produced track, right?
No, it
Like
was just a
there's no
verse.
hook, there's nothing, right? It's just a verse. And
Long
so
verse.
yeah, but so as it stands for what it is top notch. But
For him.
it's not really a track though. I mean, it's more of a spoken word in that sense because it doesn't have a chorus, it doesn't have a hook, it doesn't have the normal things that you would put together to make a complete song. Instead, it's a really well formed short poem that he
Yeah.
raps over a beat.
It got me thinking, J. Cole, looking for inspiration, doesn't get it from all the people who have all the money, who have all the gear, who have all the production. And this one cat in his basement was like, "Man, let me make this track. I'm gonna produce it. Just gonna put it out there on the internet for people who might be." He didn't think, "I wonder if J. Cole's gonna
Right.
find it." He's like, "I'm just gonna make this
Totally.
track and just put it out there and see who might be inspired from it." And when you put it out there, it's free. Like nobody has to pay you for it at that point. And so you don't know what you're gonna make off of it at all, if anything. Just trying to get some attention. He never thought that the person who inspired him to produce the track would actually be the person who inspires him to make money off the track, right?
Right.
and those, you just don't see that loop. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, Jason, how do we do that? It took J. Cole time and production from his engineers, and it took him spilling out his heart through the pencil, the pen that he was writing with. So that's something. But it didn't cost J. Cole really anything, and that would have ended up in a vault. No one would have ever heard it.
Yeah.
And he blessed this cat, and that cat is now going. He to me, he created a new kind of economy with what he did, so that he inspired who knows how much money potentially this has.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
It,
you have sort of it's more that older mixtape mentality, but just with the new technology, right? So like that mixtape mentality that says, "Hey, I'm going to put 6, 8 different tracks, kind of show what I can do out there," and then you just drop it out there, and other people are going to be making copies of it, passing it around, selling it, and you might pick it up and find somebody else's mixtape and then rap over the top of it and make your own new recording, and then that mixtape then gets copied and passed around, right? That old mentality that said it's not that the art isn't treated as a commodity, the skill is. And so I got to convince everybody that I've got the skill. And that's what the mixtapes do, is they get your name, like your name is the thing that's valuable. That mentality has sort of been replaced. I mean, I think the music industry, this is why you've got, whole tracks about how shady the music industry is. It's always trying to turn, it's trying to turn a profit, which isn't a problem. You got to make money on the art if you want to pay for more art. But it's the commodification of somebody else's name and likeness that,
bro, you
so that
hitting
they no longer can make money off of it. That's what is the problem that comes around over and over and over once you start being able to record music in any sort of significant way. It starts becoming a problem.
Well, it's not just the music industry anymore. It's our industry
It's
in
everything.
media.
Yeah. So you had historically, you had the growth of the studio system, that it really starts in the 20s and 30s and then kind of reaches its peak in the 50s and the 60s. But you start getting an independent minded film underground movement in the 40s that reaches its peak again in the 70s. And then everything sort of speeds up as the technology improves, right? So you've got the commodification, then the independency, the commodification of a person. You can always commodify the art, the artifact, the asset, but when you start commodifying a person without them gaining from it, that always ends up getting under the skin of artists, and then an independent movement grows up and bursts forth and makes a bunch of money, and then it becomes commodified again. And
well, that's what I was going to get. It's like the cycle is inescapable.
Yeah, the cycle's inescapable. The wisdom is knowing where you are in the cycle and how to leverage this moment in the cycle by creating something great and being able to monetize.
See,
and it's not just monetize though; it's being able to monetize it into wealth and not just cash in the moment. Because like this guy with the J. Cole beat, he might make a bunch of cash, and it never becomes a career because he doesn't have either the wisdom himself or somebody that comes along with the wisdom that says, let's leverage this and invest it properly.
So everything you're saying to me is making me think about the Crowder and Daily Wire, Blaze. The Blaze has kind of been on the quiet side of this. They haven't said anything.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, well,
so
we're
smart.
done with Crowder. Like we're just minding our business. They're so smart on this one, right? And the fight has been with, and I think the Daily Wire wanted this fight. I think
I think you're probably right.
Because they didn't have to have it. Crowder didn't release who it was that gave him the contract. He said there's many people out there. He actually tried to distract, I think, from who it was. We just all felt like there wasn't going to be anybody other than the Daily Wire who had that kind of money to buy Crowder in. So everybody guessed the Daily Wire. But the thing that you're talking about with artists and the system, it just repeats itself. And I don't think, so that's why I'm asking the question. So let me finish what I'm thinking. You have an artist who's creating a large amount of content at a high level that are making people want to watch, engage, and support this person. And he's doing it with a movement. So he's not just creating art for the point of enjoyment. He's actually creating art for a movement. So this is a much bigger goal than just, I got to make money. He's dealing with, I want to change the world. I want to change our institutions. I want to change how we do things, because that's how we're going to win and fight. And he's finding this conflict with the institution that's like, listen, man, we make money. That's what we do. Right. And so if this is how we work and how we operate, we ain't about that art life. We'll make our art, but we're going to make it within these parameters. We got to have this because this is what sells, like trying to get the hits, right? We know all the producers are doing it this way. This is where the hits are. And if you don't work in this box, you get penalized for working outside of the box. This is just, it's doing that so that we can make money, because this is the way that we make money. And Crowder's like, damn that. No,
Right.
I want to make art the way I want to make art without the penalties to make it. Otherwise, it's going to stifle how I make art. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's that cycle going back around again. So that's why I'm asking the question. What J. Cole did, I don't even know if we have the ability to do in our institutions. And I'm thinking of in Christendom where, I don't even know what that would look like. I think Doug has probably been that for us. He's been like our J. Cole here at Cross Politic. When we started doing our podcast, I remember everybody laughed at us.
Yeah.
Nobody would listen. You guys talk over each other. Oh my goodness. Nobody cares about those things. You guys are talking politics, and Christians need to be about this life of sharing the gospel. And so nobody would listen to us. Nobody really would engage with us. We're kind of a joke. And then Pastor Wilson comes on the show.
Gives you the respectability. It lends his respectability.
He basically freestyled, a verse, with 64 bars on it. You know what I mean? And just comes on and everybody listens. And then I'll tell you another one. Apologia did the same thing for us too, right? Jeff and Luke put our commercial in the middle of their show for another podcast. And so I guess there's ways. It's like ain't nobody. You ain't gonna see. I name a few. Ain't gonna see nobody else who got a Worldview podcast take our commercial and say you need to listen to those guys.
Yeah, here's another Worldview podcast that where you guys are. I mean, in a technical sense, you might be competition,
right?
But in a greater sense, you're not. I mean, it's the way that there's enough to go around. Mentality.
Yes. It's not seeing the world in an evolutionary mindset that there's only so many slices of the pie. And if we don't get this, we're not going to have any pie. Those guys didn't think like that. Doug didn't think like that. And I don't even know if Doug was like, let me help these guys. I don't even know if he thinks in that kind of way. He just does things like
he's a very generous person.
He is. And so he validated, he took us seriously, right? He really did. He took us, and nobody else was. Apologia took us seriously when nobody else was. And I'm just trying to think, like, how do we as Christians move into the way where we think in the economy, especially as artists, more like the way J. Cole is thinking about, man, this guy inspired me. Whatever I have that's of attention, let me bestow on him that type of, I mean, that guy couldn't afford what does J. Cole cost to do a verse? Maybe $100K, $50K?
Yeah.
Something like that to do a verse on a
minimum
song?
100K. I'm sure it's more than 100K.
Yeah, to just drop a 16 bar verse.
Yeah.
If you wanted J. Cole on the track, yeah, probably 100. You're probably right. Minimum 100K.
A minimum of 100K. So
what he gave that cat was equivalent to that, at least.
Yeah, right. And I mean, when you understand how the economy really works, how economics really works, that it's not a zero-sum game, that you can actually produce something, produce wealth, and that wasn't there before, and that there's that when you understand that, it frees up generosity, right? Because you don't and I remember an interview with Seal where he talks about he one of the greatest vocalists of the last 50 years. He's up there. He's probably got a lot more international success than simple American success, but I remember him saying, the difference between the highest levels and the high level artists is generosity. When you get to the highest levels, every single person at that level understands that true artistry takes generosity. That struck me because the you know it we don't tend I mean we tend to think in terms of got to get my own, got to protect myself, and not in terms of you know the the exchange, the economic exchange. um I mean, actually, I remember Doug talking about this at just a when I was back in Greyfriars. So he and him just saying, when because they were putting together for the first time a list of Christian businesses in town, and he said, "This isn't so that you can think in terms of getting a discount. This is so you can think in terms of giving an extra 10% when you go to these places, right? So, this is helping you learn to think generously with your brothers."
Mm.
And I do think we tend to think, oh, a Christian, oh, maybe I can get a discount, rather than, oh, a Christian, I know where my tip's going. I know where the extra's going, and learn to think in terms of generosity. Um, is learning to think like God, right? There's plenty to go around. God is a capitalist who makes a return, um, who created a world in which there's the wealth grows. You don't have to take from somebody else to grow your own stash, so to speak. But that's a fundamental, um, that Engels, who was Marx's sort of partner in intellectual crime,
His hype
he
man.
talks of his hype man. Yeah, he says that the heart of Das Kapital is um, is the limited nature of, or that there's limited goods, right? Limited means of production, limited goods, and that if somebody has some, it's because they took it from everyone else, right?
Mhm.
That's if that's the heart of communism, and the heart of Marxism is that if I have it, it's because I had to take it, right? Then we should stop and think, well, that's a what's the opposite of that, right? What's the right way to think? Because obviously that's wrong. That has caused global mass murder multiple times. So the fruit of that kind of thinking uh, is evident on the face of it. But what's the opposite of it, right? The opposite of it is it's not a closed system with limited resources. We don't live in a closed system with limited resources. We live in the kind of world that's expandable. Right? So you can get hold of um, you know, copper, for example, and depending on what you do with it, it can become more valuable. And then it can become an investment. If you dig copper out of the ground, and then you make it into wire, and then put it into a house, now it's not just the value of the copper anymore. Now, over time, the value of it as a system to move electricity around creates the possibilities of other kinds of wealth to grow. Right. So, and I know this is something that when I was in my early 20s, I didn't understand. Um, when that by the time you get to your 40s, you just have more. But just because when you buy something, if you buy something that lasts, then it outdoes the purchase, the wealth of it. And everything is like that. We've got this constant possibility to be growing the value um, of things, growing the value of things in the world. And it doesn't run out because of God's generosity, because of the kind of place that he built, because it's not a closed system. He's continually involved in it, and adding energy, and so it's a completely different way of approaching the economy or economics.
Yeah. No, it is. As you're talking, I wrote down, I think it's amazing how much cosmology affects our economics,
Yeah.
right? And so as you were talking, when we were talking about prayer, almost everything that we've talked about has come back to this is the kind of world that, right?
Yeah.
And this is the kind of world where generosity is something that grows. It doesn't stay put. It expands. To do something for somebody else has and to bless them has an effect that you don't see tripling and quadrupling and like for instance with the J. Cole thing, he blesses this cat, but he was blessed too. Like generosity
Right.
is it has feedback as well. This cat does his hard work. Whoever knows how long he stayed up at night producing this, trying to get it right, mixing it, getting the fills, the timing, and all that stuff. And he's moved probably by J. Cole, right? Because he's making a J.
Right.
Cole type of beat,
Yeah.
right? He's moved by J. Cole in his writing, goes in his lab and produces something that he think would be in the same vein. J. Cole looks up on the internet, finds a J. Cole type of beat. He's moved by it, right? He's
Right.
like, oh man. And then what he's moved by is the hunger that's inside of this artist to make music that he's helped place there in one way or another.
Yeah.
And it's coming back to J. Cole now to inspire him to write for this new album. And he's like, I don't want to keep that. Go ahead.
And he ends up writing about inspiration and the way that poverty was a driving force for him when he was young.
Yep.
And now that he's not impoverished, how difficult it is to find, how he's constantly looking for new sources of inspiration because getting out from under, getting out from under creditors was no longer the inspiration. And so which then in turn inspires other people. And you think how different that is than like Nas's when Nas raps about money, or when even Jay-Z, H to the Izzo, when he talks about he's getting back what was taken from Cold Crush, like that. And he, so and Cold Crush was taken advantage of, but the idea that money is still sitting there somehow, and by Jay-Z taking it, justice is being done because Cold Crush was robbed, and so now things are being put right because now Jay-Z's rich. It's a weird. It ends up being a really weird view of money and economics, and I think, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Jay-Z and Cold Crush from the same neighborhood? Maybe they are.
I don't know.
Are they both from
Brooklyn?
I don't know where Jay-Z's from.
Yeah, he's in Brooklyn.
Yeah, so maybe maybe that's what where he's getting the analogy from. But it's still a strange view of money, right? That guy got robbed, and so now I'm going to go out and I'm going to rob them back. You think, well, no, you wrote some great albums. You're not really robbing anyone, but ending up with a lot of money is that the mentality of kind of mob wealth is
right.
that
somebody
if
had
I've got it, somebody had to lose it, right?
Right.
And Cold Crush lost the first time in this battle for money. This time this time they lost and I won. So justice is finally done. But that's a weird view of justice, right? Because real justice would be Cold Crush's wife and kids being given what was taken plus the interest that was earned while they had it. That's what real justice would have been.
So man, I know we're talking about that. We were going to talk about, I think this will lead into it, but do you think though that the contract or should I say the proposal that was sent from the Daily Wire to Crowder was, I guess I don't want to say it was not them taking advantage, but because of the way that we do business now, everybody is seeking to get rip off somebody else, or to try and get as much as they can from the other person without giving them their worth. That's what it seems to me when I look at contracts. That's what it looks like. Most contracts are how can I get the most out of you without having to be generous in the same way. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
I do think that's how the world thinks of contracts. That's how most contracts are written. You need a lawyer to read it carefully, because somebody's trying to rip somebody off. And I was talking with my lawyer, and he's like, I do stuff with Christians all the time, and they accidentally rip each other off, even when they're not trying to, because contractual language has become so convoluted, right? In order to hide stuff, usually. And so, he said even Christians that mean well sometimes accidentally end up ripping each other off. But that's a different thing than, well, this is the way it's normally done mentality. We should always be saying, yeah, but what does God want us to do? Right? How is what kind of contractual agreements are going to be in the resurrection? How do I reflect that kind of generosity when you don't have, fear and rivalry anymore?
So then can I put this out there for you? Because I think this is going to get to communism, but the way that I look at contracts is the way that Pastor Wilson was looking at serving Christian businesses. So most of the business that I do with Christians. But if I'm going to do business with a pagan, I want to act so much like a Christian that he loves to do business with me. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I want to bless him, and I want to double bless my Christian brothers. Right. So if it was me and I'm doing a contract, I am going to give that person every penny of what I think he's worth that I have to give. Right.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, Jason Farley, I want you to come on to the network. Let's say that we have Daily Wire type money. It's like, okay, what is it that I'm going to do on my assessment? How many people do I think you can reach? What is it that I think that it's going to cost you to do your production? How can I keep stress off of your front door and back door? What are the lawyer fees going to cost? Okay, we're going to be in that. Is he the kind of person that I want to throw my weapons behind and cover his flank? I'm gonna make all those assessments. And so when I come to you with the dollar amount, it is the highest amount that I can give. Right. That's what I want to do in a contract. I don't want to say, oh, this is just a starting point. No. I've investigated. I know what you can do. You know what? I'm going to give you, let's just throw out a crazy number. I'm going to give you, what is it? I think InfoWars does $50 million over 5 years. Oh, you know what, Jason? Okay. I'm going to give you $10 million a year to do your production. Okay. And that's all I got. I got $10 million a year over 5 years. That's what I can afford to give to this. Do you want it? Yes or no? And you say, well, that's not what I was thinking. I want 15 million. I was like, listen, you didn't understand what I said. This is all I got to give you on this. Right. I don't have anything else. This is my high number. This is not my low number. This is the highest thing I got. Now, if you don't like my high number, that's totally fine. We're starting with my high number. If you don't like it, that's fine. Now, if you come and say, hey, are you paying healthcare? Are you paying this? And I'm like, yep, I'm paying all that. You're like, listen, this is the only bartering that I want to do in my contracts. I'll take care of my own healthcare. You don't have to worry about that. We'll go under some sort of contract agreement or whatever. I'll take care of all that, put that money into my pay, and there goes your extra money that you were missing. I'm like, got it. I'm with that. But I'm not here to lowball you on numbers if I think that you're valuable. Otherwise, I'm lying. I'm not right. I'm going to say, go ahead.
There's a couple of things though going into all of it is people look at money differently, right? So some people see money as respect. You're telling me this is
absolutely
my value. Other people though, they see money in terms of safety, right? So they come in, and the question in their mind is, how much do I need to ward off the threats, right? So and in that situation, you're not thinking in terms of value to bring, right? You're saying, so it's an antidote to fear. That is there's no way to get enough if that's what it's for, right? And so if that's the case, you're always trying to make sure you get more, right? Because
than the other person,
because fear always grows, right? So it makes sense to people to say, well, I've got to get as much as I can because this is what keeps me safe. This is what keeps my family safe. This is what keeps my kids safe. Well, that in that mentality, then you're going to constantly be lowballing, because why would you hand away safety? It's like we're in the middle of
idolatry,
a war,
though.
And I agree that it probably is, but I also think it is the most common middle class way of approaching money. Right.
Really?
So it is. Yeah. I mean, it's the when you
maybe
get,
I think I can see that.
Whereas, it's folks in the, folks on the low end economically tend to think of money in terms of respect. And the safety is in the relationships, right? The safety's in the community.
Bust it. You got me.
Yeah. And so then you're going to use the money to keep the relationships up and to make sure you're showing people the respect that's due so that you have the continued relationship.
Can I add something to that though too?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think something needs to be added to that too is, as an artist, I know what they need and the space that they need to be able to create. And so that's probably part of the respect. It's like, listen, an artist can't be a great businessman. I just right. those Rarely. Two. Now he can make money and he can survive, but artists, it's hard for them. And if they are great businessmen, they merge things together that ultimately get them in trouble at the end, right? There's a hybrid in between the artist and the businessman. There's that guy. There's not either or. It's usually one guy who is he loves art, but he can't do art, but he's good at business and he knows how to, Damon Dash. He's a great example. Yeah. Jay-Z was an artist. Damon Dash didn't rap. He's not a rapper. He's a business guy, but he loves rap and he knows the business that it creates and he knows how other people react to rap. And so he knows how to communicate between artists and businessmen. And so he makes great deals for his rappers, right? Jay-Z would have never been where he was apart from Damon Dash. Damon Dash was the business guy, right? So and anybody who's ever made it.
Bernie Brillstein with all the comedians. Yeah. He loves comedy, but he's a businessman who made sure that comedians could just do their job. And he took care of a lot of the greatest comedians all had Bernie Brillstein for a manager.
Well, here's somebody who's a hybrid is Adam Ivine, right?
Oh yeah, okay.
Right, he was a musician, right, producing and for artists in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and then he started seeing where music was going with hip hop, and he ended up teaming up with Dre, right? He was an engineer actually, I think, above all, and then he started becoming was it like a label manager or something like that, an A&R for large record companies, and then started seeing the business plays and went more into the business, but he was originally an artist, right? So whereas there's a hybrid.
Guys like Warren G, who basically changed the game production wise and then disappear because they didn't have anybody protecting their back on the business side.
Right. It happens so much. So there's this hybrid there. So I just wanted to throw that in there. There's the reason that's important for somebody who like me is because I know what it takes for artists to create something, to go into the den, not care or know what's going on around them necessarily, and then make something that either is very offensive to everybody, that starts the conversation that people need to have, or it's enjoyable. Artists need that space to create. I know that an artist can go for 3 weeks playing basketball, swimming, enjoying the Caribbeans, and just having a great time. And you're like, why aren't you working? And everybody's upset. And I'm like, no, they are working. They absolutely are working. And then in 3 days create a whole album. Right.
Right.
It's like, why is he so expensive? Because he needs this experience to make that one. Right.
Yeah.
In the same way, like the ghetto has to make, the ghetto made Jay-Z what he was, the lifestyle there. And now Jay-Z is rap for rich people. Right. Because that's the world that's influencing what he's doing.
Yeah. And you see this with comedy all the time, where you've got a great, hilarious comedian who makes a bunch of money and quits being funny. And you think, well, what happened? Well, apparently it was it was that hunt for respect that made them work so hard. Or, the hunt for money that made them work so hard. Once they have it, they don't work as hard anymore, because they're like, well, look, I got all the respect I need now. I don't need to fight for it like I used to. And so, especially with comedians, that they're funny because they were bullied when they were younger. They when they're not getting bullied anymore, they quit being funny. You realize, oh, this is a tool for a particular purpose. Outside of that purpose, you don't know how to use this thing. And then you got other guys, that are just craftsmen. Chappelle, Seinfeld, guys that no matter
Chris
where
Rock,
you put them, Chris Rock, I think Chris Rock's probably the hardest working stand-up comic around. Even though he's at the top, he still works harder than just about anyone else at the craft. And because it wasn't it wasn't a tool for a particular purpose, it was a craft that he was developing. And so no matter where he is, he's still being funny. Now Chappelle tells rich people jokes, now poor people jokes, and they're funny, but it works in whatever situation he's in. Yeah.
So what do you think? I want to finish this up though. What do you think about my concept of contracts versus, because I think part of what happened with Crowder was that it was seen as disrespect, because it wasn't a contract. It was some sort of initiation to be bartered with and to work through. And
I do think that he felt, well, so there's a couple of things. One is the contract was a squeeze blood from the rock contract, right? How much can we get? How much money can we get from this guy? How much money can we as an institution make on this guy's work and reputation? That kind of contract, something that is overlooked is in his original conversation, he says, this is something's wrong with the movement. One of the first things he mentions is conservative artists burnout. He says, our burnout rate is so much higher. Why is that? And he says, it's because of contracts like this. Because we squeeze cash from artists as assets, or we treat artists like assets. Not art. Art is an asset, but an artist, if you treat an artist like an asset, then you get massive burnout the way we are. So I think that's one of the things that's at the heart of what he's talking about that isn't getting the play because it's not sexy like a $50 million offer.
Everybody's missing the $50 million stuff. They get over it, people. I mean, it really, there's nothing that you're doing. There's nothing that you're producing. There's nothing that I'm producing that is a $50 million contract. We don't even understand the category in which he's working. Okay. We don't even have the categories to how much. Look, Tucker Carlson is what, $60 million over 4 or 5 years or something like that. I can't remember writing it down. It's like something like that. He's one of the highest paid. I think he might even be more than that. I'll look it up. But, you don't produce on that level.
Right.
Right. You just don't. So everybody's like, I would have took it. Yeah, you would have took it because you ain't worth that. Now right. Be worth that. Now be worth that. And somebody offers you that. And you're like, wait a second. That's, you know what I mean? That's a different category altogether. Right.
It is. But I think even the question of worth that what do we even mean, is one of the things that I think is at the heart of the whole conflict, because so many of us think that our economic position um, has some sort of reflection of our ontological value, right? So when we look at something like that, we think, man, if somebody's offering me that much, like that's they're telling me my ultimate value is really high, or my value um to society is really high, something like that. And so we would be blinded by by the numbers because of our cosmology, right? That's because of our metaphysic. Um, and what people that make a lot of money often realize is, oh, dang, the money doesn't mean as much as I thought. The money doesn't change as much as I thought, right? Now, there are things like I'm hustling, trying to make more money. That's because there are things that, because there are bills and debts to pay, and those sorts of things. Trying to pay, you invest in my kids' education, and um, all those things. But I know that more money changes very few things, because we've gone through periods of nothing, um, and we've gone through periods where we've got a lot, right? We've gone through periods with significant, you know, um, six-figure medical debt, um, and we've gone through periods where we're making plenty of money, and we can throw parties for the whole neighborhood, and and the difference that in the two situations is so minuscule, because the value is the fellowship with the family, and it doesn't shift and change that much. I
So
mean,
wait, are you?
does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Are you saying that the reason that the money is what everybody is jumping at is because of the way that they understand who that money makes them at the end of the day?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So
That
if I had $50 million, I would finally be somebody important. Who I am inherently changes, and I become higher on the chain of beings, in one sense or another,
right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I move up in, I'm more important to society, or I'm
Wait,
fine. My
so
value is finally settled, way up there.
so money changes my ontological reality.
Right. That's the way most people approach it, conservatives and liberals alike. And the difference is, on the communists, what they say is, money is a sign of your ontological value. Since we know everyone's equal, there ought not to be money. I mean, that's the argument that Karl Marx makes
Mm.
for no private property, right? Everyone is equal. And so there shouldn't be private property, because private property, when one person has more than another private property, that more private property than another, then that makes them higher. And they're actually equal. And so we need to get rid of private property because it has this effect on people. Conservatives tend to just say, yes, it's true, having more money makes you more valuable, but some people are just more valuable than others. So they should have more money, right? Um,
So are they talking
you,
ontologically then at that point though? Are conservatives trying to have an
I don't think
ontological argument?
I don't think we make the distinction even at all in our minds, right? I think we have bought into the flattening of economic and ontological equation.
When you say flattening, you mean
That
egalitarianism and the idea of
e-
economics then.
exactly, that there's
Mm.
we've bought into the egalitarianism. We've bought into the ontology, the metaphysic of egalitarianism, so that even our attempts at hierarchy they share the same ontology. They have the exact same metaphysic.
Can you
So
explain or
we
give me an
say,
example? Yeah.
yeah. So somebody that's more important in society or has more money is more valuable to society, is more valuable as a person. Somebody, if one person is in charge, it's because they are more, because they are better, more valuable,
Okay,
right? So
don't shoot me for this. Isn't that true? I'm just, I
not
mean,
right,
yeah,
not in God's economy, right? Because what's the thing that makes us metaphysically of worth?
made in the
Well,
image of
it's
God. Yeah.
made in the image of God, right? And that's something that is equal to all people, no matter how big, small, rich, poor, um, he, powerful, not powerful, right? Um, this is the Mother Teresa holding the hands of someone as they die of leprosy, understanding of humanity.
No,
That
don't throw the no. You can't throw Mother Teresa in here. That's cheating. You throw Mother.
well, no,
What's
it's
like using
but
Hitler?
that's
Like, yeah, you win the conversation.
but it's that is the reason that what the work she does is so convicting is because we know that that's true, right? And
Mm.
it's hard to remember in the moment, right? And she I mean she's really interesting as a person. When she got one chance to speak publicly before the president of the United States, and she addressed him in particular about abolishing abortion. I mean, like you got one opportunity to ever speak publicly, and she spends that time explaining that the value of every human life is equal, and we ought not to um, dehumanize uh, uh, children in the womb just because they're small and out of sight, because that devalues every human in society. Because you are shifting the understanding of unless you're powerful enough, the you're only important if you're powerful, right? And that's not true. And so, in the name of Jesus, end abortion, right? That so she gets one chance to speak publicly, and that's what she speaks on. It's she's like as gangster as they ever come. But you also hear the stories of her. She's off in India running these places that take care of people as they die um, from incurable diseases, and she is on the rotation of people that clean the bathroom, right? She's Mother Teresa, right? Like she's important, but she's just God just happened to make her also a mouthpiece. Um, but really she was just a servant, where she saw the value of every person and served them.
So let me push back on this without cheating using Mother Teresa because that's like a trump card. Um, Generals are more important than captains or privates. And if you don't have a general,
Dep- but so but this is where the ontological and economic distinctions are so important, right? So they hold an office that's above, um, that's above in the military, right? So I'm not in the military, so if I run into a general, I don't need to salute, but somebody that is, that's a private, does salute because of the relationship between the two offices that they hold. The
in that particular,
in that particular jurisdiction, right? In the same sort of way, my kids, I expect them to be respectful to
and
adults,
salute
but they
you.
don't have to. Yeah, well, they don't have to obey all dads, though, right? If another dad says, "Hey, I need you to do this," they should be respectful to people older than them, and respectful to anyone and everyone, and think, okay, this is a person that's older than me, and they're asking me to do this. Is that still the right thing to do? They're not required to obey all dads, though. by virtue of them being a dad, right? They're required to obey me as their father. We have an economic relationship. I
In a
am
jurisdiction. Yeah.
also, yeah, in a jurisdiction, right? But I am also a an equal with them, right? They're my little brothers and sisters in Christ. Um, and that, so, um, if I, when I sin against one of my kids, I have to ask them to forgive me the same way I do anybody, even though I have an office with jurisdiction over them, for a time. It's not permanent, but for a time I do. Um, I have to, they have to, because of our equality, they have to forgive me and I have to ask for forgiveness in the same way that they have to ask for forgiveness and I have to forgive them. But there's a ontological equality that is not affected by an economic hierarchy.
So
In
then,
fact, the economic hierarchies are what a healthy society looks like, right? That
mm,
with an ontological equality. And so but because we've equated the two, we've tried to flatten everything, right?
so
So
then,
even now, yeah, go ahead.
so then when I say a general is more important than a private, the answer to that is like, wait a second, you just merged together the economic and ontological realities when really a general is and a private are as important as they need for the job that needs to be done, right? So if you have
Yeah,
right. So the ontological realities of importance. So then how do you speak about that? Because I'm thinking, well, I want a guy on the top who knows the battlefield, knows war, knows how and where to put his pieces on the board in order to be able to win. And the private doesn't do that. Now the private's going to go out and fight the war, but
right.
for me, the most
Well,
important part would be a general because I have to guide these guys.
right. So it depends on what you mean by important, right? So, and this is where, you, um, you if when you have some of the, um like throughout history, you've got some of the really great, um generals. uh a good example is, Robert the Bruce or William Wallace. um William Wallace, when they were getting ready for battle, he was very gifted in guiding, an army, right? So he was able to win against, significant odds because of his skill as a general. He was also an enormous guy, huge sword, was deadly on the battlefield himself, but he also could lead men. But when they were prepping for a battle, he would walk down the line and he knew each of them and he would remind them, "Oh, do you remember the story of your wife?" Or like, "Oh, I remember, your oldest daughter. Remember when I held her in my arms that one time and she said this funny thing?" And where he would walk from person to person and remind them, what they fought for, and because he knew them all. He knew their homes, he knew their families. He would, so he because he valued them as people, they would charge
Mm.
into hell with him. So because he understood, but he also understood that his job as a general was to be good enough at his job to win the battle, so that they trusted him. But because he was able to make that distinction. We are fighting together to win this battle because you and your life and your family are important,
So
right?
yeah, yeah. So in one sense or another, he's like, I fight for your wife, I fight for your daughter,
Yep.
I fight for your people, and they're like, I fight for your wife, I fight for your daughter, I
Right.
fight for your people, right? It
Yeah.
was an
But they
ontological.
also understood, yeah, that ontological equanimity, they all understood that, but
Mm.
they also knew that if they're going to win, they have to submit to him as the general, right?
Right.
That on the battlefield, so it wasn't him giving them orders was not a threat to their ontological equality, right? Them submitting, the you see this with, I mean, really up until the age of egalitarianism, which
Which is when?
kicks. I mean, it really starts kicking in and coming home from World War One, between the
Really?
wars. So, I mean, it's amazing if you read. Well, you were just telling me about the P.G. Wodehouse, right? With
Yes.
Jeeves and Wooster. We love
Yeah.
those books, but just Jeeves saying, "No, this is my spot. My spot in society is to serve the gentry." And he
And
was
he was
happy
smarter
and
than
good
yeah.
at it, smarter, and he knew, and they all knew that Jeeves was the smartest in the room. But the societal organization wasn't a threat, and so they could continue in it. You see the same thing. Dorothy Sayers novels I think are a good example. She wrote just crime novels, but they make the hierarchy amongst men. She makes the hierarchy amongst men really beautiful, um, and because it's something that she really admired, and you can feel her admiration coming through as she writes about the best men are the ones that love and embrace their spot in society, do it really well, even if whether it's the top, the middle, the bottom, wherever it is, they love they love and embrace the spot in society that they have. Um, and you've got good people and bad people at every level of society. It's not like money makes you a bad guy or a good guy, or you but the economic, the hierarchical organization of society, um, it's going away in Dorothy Sayers' day, and so she is trying to make it continue to seem beautiful, or continue to look beautiful in her novels. And there's a very sweet relationship that grows up between the two main characters. They eventually get married, um, and but there's she makes the submission and leadership, submission and headship in marriage look beautiful, because she admired it so much, right? That she's her um, her translation of Dante. You can see that as she gets older, um, she gets more and more enamored with Dante, partly because of the beauty of hierarchy that is put on display in Dante really, really well. And her translation of the Purgatorio, she dedicates to Charles Williams, who was one of the greatest Arthurian King Arthur scholars of the day, and was constantly teaching on King Arthur, and teaching her about King Arthur. And that's another example of books that are purposefully trying to make hierarchy just show how beautiful a well-functioning hierarchy is.
You're talking. The first thing that came to my mind was one body with many members. You got Paul talking about that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And but and I think we all know it intrinsically. We understand that reality of fingernail, a toenail, a pinky toe. You need all of these different things. Like, you need them, but our society tells us, yeah, we know we need them, but you don't want to be one of those things,
Right.
right? Like, you want to be the brain. You want to be the head. You want to be that guy. Like, that's who you want to be,
Yeah.
right? And
You
so
want
I
to be the
remember,
mouth.
yeah, you want to be that. Don't you want to be that, right? You don't want to be the thing that gets the least amount of respect is probably a vein, you know,
Yeah.
that moves from the heart. Like, nobody talks about, I got beautiful veins, you know. Like, nobody,
Right.
you don't want to be that, right? And so but we know we all need them, but then we all move everybody to be the eyes or the nose or the mouth. There's only a few amount of things that we want to be. And And because everybody seeks to be that, then it destroys even the body even being able to operate. Where's the hands at? Where's the muscles in the forearm? Where's the veins that getting the oxygen and the blood flow front to the fingertips so you can feel well? Like we don't think you need all of those different pieces to operate to do your job well, and they don't all receive the same amount of glory even, right? Like,
Right.
and that's okay.
It is there, and we also know that in the resurrection, all glory that was deserved but not given will be put right. Right. So there's also the
That's
promise
good.
that there are somebody that ought to have gotten the glory that they didn't. Well, that'll be put right in the end.
Man, you know what? That's the lie, ain't it? Oh my goodness, this lie. You're not gonna get what you deserve. That's the biggest lie. It's like, well, then you gotta get yours. You gotta get yours because ain't nobody gonna get you what you deserve. But just why the Bible talks about do things unto the Lord. He sees every little thing you do, and it will be made. Man, that is so good. Oh.
But that's one of the things that keeps us rivals. And you can't function as the body of Christ when you're rivals.
So, as I've been studying communism, it thrives in the same way that fire gets bigger because of oxygen. Communism thrives off of rivalries.
Yeah.
It
envy,
sees them
rivalry.
And exploits them. Yeah. It thrives off of that. And the more that I've gone back and been reading about the fifth commandment and how the fifth commandment lays out the order for society between superiors, inferiors, and equals, when you have an egalitarian or when you have an abusive hierarchy, egalitarianism comes in and starts to exploit that sin as a way to separate and say, see, this is why you need to be at the top. Like, this is why you need to be here. And this is not going to work. These workers out here are making the company. And if it wasn't for these workers, there would be no company. I think they should own the company and not the guy who started it. Let's take over the whole company and let us have the company and give it to us. And so you get, same thing's happening right now with the policing. You have Tyree Nichols, who got killed by 5 black officers, and everybody's screaming, let's federalize the police. Because, obviously this is not working. We need to put all this power in one place where we can have the authority to impose our will, right? And so it's communism comes in and tries to exploit the lack of repentance or the failures inside of a hierarchical system. And so when it's broken, we don't know how to get it back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I think, and I mean, if I understand it, those 5 officers have been arrested, right?
Yeah. They're fired and arrested. Yeah.
Fired and arrested. So there's a real sense in which things are actually working. It's an example of it working. Now,
no, Jason. No. If it was working, it wouldn't have happened.
But that's the lie, that the law should somehow be able to stop sin. It doesn't, right? The law, the job is to come in and punish for sin, right? It's to bring justice. The law can't, the law is not going to stop the sin. If the law is functioning properly, then those people are arrested. If they are convicted of depending on what degree murder or whatever they're convicted of, then they get the death penalty. Right? Oh, is that what it is? So yeah, not death penalty for second degree, but
yeah, no. But if they'll get 15 to 60 years and a $50,000 fine.
Right. So that hopefully is paid to the family if there's a fine. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, so we but what what communism runs on is envy, rivalry, and limited resources. Right.
Uh-huh. Say that
That's the
again.
envy, rivalry, and limited resources. That's the heat, air, and fuel to fire communism, or for communism to be able to burn.
Heat, air, and
So
fuel.
yeah, that's how, I
Is that
mean,
what you
to
said?
have fire, to have fire, you have to have heat, air, and fuel.
Wait a second.
Right.
That's when you said that, I just thought about all the green stuff. That's all communism.
Yeah, yeah,
Like heat, air,
absolutely.
and fuel. That's
Yes, you
windmills,
got you're totally right.
right? Right. Heat
Yeah,
and air. So, and you got fire, which is trying to be electric now. And then the fuel. That's all in the same. Hold on a second.
yeah. The guy that started, oh, no, I can't remember, one of the major conservationist groups that has been taken over by environmentalists. So Christians throughout history have done a lot of what's called conservation work. Conservationist philosophy tends to be very, very close to Christian understanding of the world, of nature, but environmentalism puts a rivalry between people and the earth, right? And one of the major conservationist groups throughout history, the guy running it, he got run out, and he said, "Look, this whole environmentalist movement is a watermelon. It's green on the outside but red on the inside. This is
Oh,
the way that communists are getting into your home is through environmental scare tactics, because you need scarcity, envy, and rivalry, right? So the same thing modern environmentalist movements encourage us to think in terms of nature and resources. It's the same thing politically with communism, is envy, rivalry, and limited resources. And we've got to fight all three with with generosity, with the an understanding of celebrating our neighbors' victories, right? And
oh,
then taking away the envy, right? So
oh,
gratefulness, right? That's the only way to really fight communism.
oh, we're in trouble. We're doomed. If generosity and celebrating our neighbors' victories is the way that we're going to get out of this, um, uh, uh, which is funny because it's exactly what J. Cole thought he needed to do in order to be able to have inspiration, right? I need to celebrate
Right,
somebody else's victories. I need to celebrate this guy's victory. Here goes this, go win, right? And he made himself a part of his victory by doing something for him, not expecting
right,
anything else back from it. And that's hard for man. And I'm gonna get in trouble. Let me not say all the things. Look, if you look at the field right now, this is what this is going to go back to Crowder. The evangelical media empires are all fractured, and
yeah,
none of them want to celebrate anybody's victories in a real way. And I'm not saying there's no such thing as healthy competition. I get it with capitalism, but we are at the point where we're fracturing ourselves so much off from each other that we're making factions. Let me try and explain this. Steven Crowder said we're getting um, uh, subscription fatigue. Okay.
yeah,
And what he means by that is that everybody has a subscription out there now that you can sign up on, right? I can think of 6 just in our circles with evangelicalism that I'm close to. And the competition between them, there's nothing wrong with the I'm not, don't hear me saying it's bad for competition. But what it ends up doing when you start talking about this fatigue, you got Daily Wire, you got the Blaze, you got Fox, you got you know, uh, other small, you got InfoWars, you got all these different groups, right? That are all kind of separate. And now when somebody says, okay, I only have $15, right? Where am I going to throw my money in to make the most amount of impact and be entertained and engaged the same way? I'm picking Daily Wire. Now, because I picked the Daily Wire, when I put my money there, it's not that I become enemies of everybody else, but I want where I put my money at to actually have an impact. So I'm going to defend my investments into
Right.
this entity against all others because that's where I think is the best. And so I become a DW-anite, right? And
Yeah.
anything that comes against it, I'm going to fight. And so it creates direct factions against each other who are supposed to be on the same team. And you get tribal warfare.
Yeah.
Which is what broke out.
And I think it's because we don't have, I mean, I think that Christendom was the solution to tribal warfare the first time.
Well, it's happening with the Christians right now. I don't know,
I know. But do you know, are there Christians defending Christendom anywhere? Right. You don't have.
Well, to be fair, they think that they are.
I think if you even said, hey, we should restore Christendom, most of them would say, oh, no, because they're more nationalist than they are Christian.
Well, that is the movement right now, is to restore Christendom with nationalism.
Yeah, right.
Those two aren't different.
Nationalism was the road out of Christendom the first time. You're messing with me now, but
I am.
The first time though, nationalism was that was how the secularists decentralized or broke up Christendom the first time. Was nationalism. That was the secularist move to break down Christendom so that it could be conquered a piece at a time by secularism.
And because Christianity was where people were putting their nationality. That's their identity. That was their identity.
Their identity,
I'm a Christian.
Yeah, was wrapped up in was being received in their baptism.
Right.
And so God's name is on me, and so I am a part of the it's not even just a worldwide faith, right? The great cloud of witnesses that has gone before me, those that have died and are waiting in heaven for the resurrection, those that will come in the future. I'm a part of this galactic
intergalactic. Come on.
Intergalactic time, across time and space, this empire of Jesus that that all of the angels submit to and the planets are a part of. So the Christendom was just a reflection of a greater hierarchical cosmos. So,
and nationalism had to get rid of that because they couldn't control them the way they wanted to, right?
They couldn't go to straight. Well, individualism wasn't having any sort of effect on that, but nationalism finally did crack that up into pieces. Now, some of that is just because the health of the church, the dead things don't rot, right? It doesn't matter how many maggots you put onto something that's alive. They don't eat things that are alive. What you had in Christendom was it was dead, and so it began to rot from the inside. And nationalism was the philosophical, political way out of Christendom that secularists pushed. So,
though, Jason, let me say this. I think we are so illiterate or even so far past that nationalism might be a step closer to Christendom.
It really could be. Yeah,
We're so
this is
secular, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
so
We might be, nationalism. Perhaps it's the road back in.
it's going the other way.
It might
Yeah,
be.
that's
Right.
what I'm thinking.
I'm happy to have those conversations and debates, but I don't want to have them without people understanding that nationalism the first time is not the solution. The first version of nationalism is not the solution. So, I mean, you know me, I'll talk to anybody about anything, and happy to have the conversation.
People don't want to talk to you. People don't want to talk to you. I realize that right now. People don't want to talk to you.
I did.
I don't know what's wrong
I
with people.
did learn that. Yeah,
They don't want to talk to you.
that's fine. I'm busy anyway. But I think that if we don't recognize, if we're not aware, if we don't recognize the way that nationalism was the way out of Christendom, that nationalism did have, it grew up at the same time as evolution. It grew up at the same time as the invention of race, the invention of kind of the secularization of the economy. All of those things all grew up at the same time, and nationalism was one of the things that grew up at the same time as all of that. So
secularization of the economy.
Right. So, in the Middle Ages, one of the things that the church spent its time discussing was, what does it look like? How is a Christian economy? How do you make the economy specifically Christian? Right? What does it look like for the economy? The way that people spend their money in exchange, and how do you derive from the scriptures and from wisdom a Christian economy that stands out as explicitly Christian? So they were having those discussions all the time. You had both a conservative and a progressive version of a secularization happen at the same time that you had Darwin writing and Karl Marx writing, and that was all at the same time. So that the secularizing movement that was going on, nationalism was a part of that. Right. So you didn't have, you started to say, well, he's a pastor, he shouldn't be addressing economics. Right. That you didn't say that in the Middle Ages. The pastor addressed whatever the Bible talks about, right? And economics is one of the things the Bible talks about. How is it that you treat your neighbor? How do you love one another with the way you spend and don't spend? How do you, the price gouging? How do if you're not allowed to keep a poor person's cloak at overnight because you took a loan on it, does that affect the way that we as Christians price bread in a famine, for example? They were having those discussions. What does it look like to have an explicitly Christian economy in which we know Jesus is the one that's king over this economy? That you start getting people saying, well, hey, you're a pastor, you should stick to your specialization. As nationalism arises, right? We leave the economy and we leave politics to the experts.
You know what? That's what scares me about the new nationalism, is that a lot of two kingdom guys are the ones who are in front of it. So that's going to come back to that at the end of the day, because that's exactly the same sort of secularization of economics.
Yeah.
It has to be, right? Like it's going to go that way.
Yeah. Well, because the two kingdom theology, the modern two kingdom theology, is just Kant's metaphysic hanging around Christian and in Christian circles. So,
oh man, we don't even have time for you to flesh that one
I
out.
know.
But you did that on purpose.
I know.
So
I mean, to this day, if you search my name on the internet, that clip from Cross Politics is what comes up. So nobody wants to have full conversations anyway.
I just want to check and make sure. Has anybody called to have you on their show yet about that whole thing? Nobody called yet.
No, not about that. I mean, I still have gone on some storytelling podcasts and poetry podcasts and stuff like that.
That's the good stuff. No, it doesn't matter anyway. That stuff, that wasn't, I mean, whatever. Who cares? Those are the storytelling ones are the ones that really matter. Jason, I felt like I could have turned off everything right after you said generosity and celebrating each other's wins is how we get out of this. Man, I know that's the truth. I've said it before on the show. Apologia, Doug, the way that they treated us when we got started, those were the only two like that. You know what I mean? They were the only two that was like that. Everybody else has, and it's so weird, without saying it, has considered us a threat or afraid of what we might say that might hinder their audience. And I know that we don't all agree on everything. I mean, we got things we disagree on, but I can see another Christian brother who is doing good work and say, man, y'all need to check that guy out, man, or check these people out. These are good folks. And this is whole reason that I will not and will always stand behind founders. Like they have been, if I was a Reformed Baptist, there wouldn't be any other place that I would be at except for with those guys down there. It doesn't, and the way the PCA church is going, if you're a Presbyterian, you'd be better off there too. It's just, that's the reality of it. But I can see the successes. I can see the fight. And when I see godly Christian brothers engage into a fight, the last thing I want to do is be silently supportive. That is dangerous. I don't like the silently supportive because nobody knows where you stand at,
Right.
And
so one of the things I think though that's interesting is when you look at like the PCA, it just had a pretty major win with the folks from the folks that were
in Missouri.
The folks that were doing the Revoice all left, right? And and the guys that had been working on that case had said over and over, guys, we're working on it. Be patient. We're trying to do it the right way. Right. They had a major win. Good point. Of the people, all of the people, what disappointed me was all of the people that had been so vocally in opposition. You need to just take care. You should have you need an all-out campaign. You guys need to be all over social media denouncing all this. And they're like, we are trying to do this the way that our denomination has agreed to do it. We're trying to be the conservatives here who see a problem, agree it's a problem, and do it the right way. I haven't seen people come out in support and say, hey guys, you were right.
You know what?
Right. They haven't, because it's not.
Or at least come out and say, did you hear about how successful the PCA has been in removing and eradicating this disease out of? They had a surgery.
Yeah.
It was a long surgery.
They had a surgery and it was a long surgery and it was successful. Right. So we should be rejoicing. But it's not getting the attention.
It hasn't. No, I have to agree with you.
And that's, and I look at that and I think,
hold on, let me push back.
It's par for the course. But I also think.
Let me push back, because here's the deal, Jason. They weren't noisy about the idea of it happening anyway. Right? So they haven't been as loud about what they've done. They've kind of said, hey, we got it.
That might be
true. We got it. Leave us alone. And so we wouldn't even know if they won or not.
Yeah. But I think that there were the people that were.
Greg Johnson was louder than everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. That's how it popped up.
That is how it popped up. But at the same time, you have when the accusers that came in and said you are not dealing with it, have not come back and said, okay, you told us that you were dealing with it, and obviously, you were trying to deal with it through the proper channels, and that did the job. That worked, right? It accomplished what you said it would accomplish. The accusers haven't come back and said, hey, I know we said that it wasn't going to work and we were wrong.
Well, no, I don't think that's actually how it happened. I think what happened was Greg Johnson and his ilk popped up and started talking real loud. PCA has been over there fanning the flames of Tim Keller out in New York and didn't know what was going on in Missouri. A bunch of other
That
people
is probably true. Yeah.
said, "Hey, do y'all know what's going on in Missouri? Why you over here giving praise and worship to Tim Keller?" And we're like, "Hey." And I think the PCA said, "You know what? You're right. You're right. Give us a second. We'll deal with it." And then never told everybody we dealt with it.
We dealt with it. Yeah. I mean, it
So
was public, and it might be
I
because
think,
I'm in the PCUSA that it was public to me, but I think
well,
it
no,
was public when the whole thing went down.
but it wasn't. We had to. Only reason we were paying attention to it was because of the Greg Johnson stuff. But I don't know anybody in the
Right.
PCA that when they said, "Hey, we're dealing with it," I think remember us saying like, "Man, they're pushing back on this." But I think a lot of people took the cues and said, "All right, then if you say you're gonna handle it, we're gonna let you handle it," and got quiet. And then once it was handled, it was like, "Hey, guess what we did?" So this is probably the most public that I've seen anybody from the PCA say, "Hey,
but it was
it's
only a
been
couple of
handled."
weeks ago that it was only a couple of weeks ago that it finally
Or a month ago, at least,
completed.
wasn't it?
A month ago, yeah. And
Well,
George Grant, I think George Grant did a good job of
I
coming out
shared
and
his
saying, coming out and saying, hey, because he had done a good job of saying, I talked personally to the people whose responsibility it is.
Yeah.
They are going through the proper channels. We
Yeah.
have to let them do that. Let's wait and see. And so he came
There
out
were a
and
lot
said,
of good pastors doing that. There were a lot of good
yeah,
pastors who were at work in that. But
but I think that there were other people, I think, that they were rejoicing in glee at the downfall of the PCA. That was
sure.
unfortunate to watch. So, but like, I know that going through the whole process here in the Northwest, it proved out, it proved things out here as well. So, I mean, I think there were a number of churches that ended up leaving because they were like, oh, apparently we're not, progressives aren't welcome here. And right. But that sort of thing.
No, it's
like,
not. Y'all repent.
like,
Y'all
hey,
come in.
yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Whatever it is. But
I agree with you.
But doing the process is, going through the process the right way is, I think, a really important part of the surgery that needs to happen. And it needs to happen on a regular basis. And I think that the real heart of the denomination is the pulpits of the denomination, and that's something that that I hope was that there were pulpits that were reinvigorated to preach controversial truth.
I question that still, but I believe that because the ones
I don't know. That's what I said. I hope.
Yeah.
I hope, like this last Sunday, we're finishing up Romans, and we had the pastor just paused at Junia, and the word deaconess, and explained that this is that you can have somebody who's a helper and somebody who's known by the apostles, and not be in an ordained office, because the ordained offices are clearly only for men, right? Like, I've always been in a church where those truths are just unashamedly preached and declared, and but I know that's not the case everywhere. And so I'm hoping that this conflict has relit fires that were dimming and going out.
Jason,
But I mean, I don't know. I don't know one way or the other.
I have to give this to you. You are so right. You are so right. And even though I disagree necessarily maybe with the interpretation, one of the things I got convicted of recently was when people go through battles and people get into the front part and see the front side of the battle, and everybody draws their lines and then everybody goes away, but the individual who's still standing still has to go through it. He's still Athanasius, right? And I've seen this so many times with Pastor Wilson. He will go through a battle. He will fight the battle. He would be right about the issue, and nobody cares, even though he's fighting the battle. And then when it comes back again and everybody else has to fight his battle, no one says Doug called this 20, 30 years ago, and
Right.
we didn't stand next to him when he was fighting it because we thought he was a racist and he was missing the point. And then here goes critical race theory, social justice gospel, and all this stuff, and Marxism and communism coming right back in. And now we got to come up with a statement on social justice and the gospel. Right. And Doug been right about this for 30 years, and 40 years, which is why he started a school. Right. And so I've watched nobody come back and say, Doug, you were right. We should have stood with you. Right. And I'll even point to myself. I've watched even little scrimmages, the whole Rachel Denhollander thing that I got into over the trailer. That was 2019. And we saw that coming then with the whole SBC being maneuvered into this position, and we were calling it. And I put the trailer out and said there are principalities and powers and working through this particular ideology, right? And everybody was like, how could you call her a devil? It's like, is that what you thought? Okay. You missed the point, which is why you're hurting right now. And nobody has come back to say, guess what? You were right.
Yeah.
You were right. You called it. And we should have stood with you. And I'm sorry. You were right. They haven't done that with founders, right? They haven't done that with me. And I have been just as guilty of watching certain battles happen and not coming back and saying to the people, you are right. You were right.
Yeah.
Praise God for you. I'm standing with you. Am I thankful for your fight that you had and that you fought by yourself and standing by yourself? And I just want you to know you're not standing by yourself anymore. Right. Like, so, and until we start encouraging each other like that and start celebrating those kind of victories, even past victories, I'm in my heart, I'm going back now and I'm like, okay, I need to examine some things and go tell people, hey, you know what? I didn't stand with you publicly here, but I was privately cheering you on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And some of it was that I didn't know actually how to judge a situation. I didn't see the plays in front of me. I wasn't as educated. And because of your standing, I am now. And you won't be standing alone in this. And until we, so I think you're right. We do need to come back and say to those people who won this battle, praise God. I see you. Way to go, you guys, getting that cancer out of there. Amen, PCA. There's some fight and life in you, and we're happy to see you guys engage. I think you're right. This needs to be blown up that the PCA has won this battle. Right? You got plenty more to fight.
What happens is we treat it more like the this police situation where the fact that it happened is evidence that it is the problem, rather than saying, okay, the fight is going to come. It's just a question of, do we fight like godly men and fight in faith and stand right in the face? That are we faithful through it? So the fact that the PCA is having to fight off modernism, having to fight off egalitarianism, the fact that they isn't a problem, right? But it's being treated like it is. The fact that there is a fight is a problem, that it shouldn't have ever come to a fight, that we should have had laws in place that kept us from ever having to stand faithfully in a fight.
Well, I mean, and I got to push back on that a little bit. Can I say it differently?
Yeah.
Men who haven't observed and practice the law that they have in front of them is the reason they have this fight so deep inside their camp, right? Because there is a fight.
I do think that it got, but I honestly think it's because we have tried to fight it. We haven't fought it on the front lines.
Right.
The pulpit is the front lines. We've misplaced the front lines.
But how you get a wolf?
So we had to fight it. We had to fight it in the camp because we didn't fight it at the front lines. Agreed.
Right. And so again, there is the fact that we have to fight is an inescapable reality. What's happening right now is all the enemies of Christ are getting put at his foot, right? And so you're gonna have to fight. That's it. Right? But when I am in my barracks and the guy next to me has got a gun pointed at the guy next to me, I'm like, how did he get in here? Right? It
was a little bit like, you turn to your left and the the guy in uniform with you is hailing Hitler in World
Yeah,
War II, and you're like, wait, what?
Ain't nobody
What
vet
is
him?
going
Like,
on? Yeah.
do we have a council
But
that somebody vets these people? Or how do we not know this? And it's
but I
like,
think
or
that
what are we doing at vetting that allows this kind of thing to creep in so much in that we're having churches join with him to leave,
But but those are the conversations and that are happening. I mean, I know that's one of the conversations that was happening at our presbytery is, okay, wait, what is so let's pull out the entire ordination process. Let's look at it step by step and ask ourselves, what's going on, right? How what are we doing? What does the vetting process even look like? Are we? And so, I mean, I am hopeful that
that's good.
that other people are doing that as well, right? So because you can be, because you can have a whole group of faithful guys just doing church faithfully day in and day out, and then look, and somebody wasn't at their post, right?
That's a good
One
point.
guy wasn't at their post, and then they look around and they're like, what? Oh my gosh, the fight's right here. And then they faithfully fight and win that fight. To say at that point, man, we need to burn down the whole system, rather than say who wasn't at their post, right? I think the wrong way to do it. Now, if you learn that the entire wall is burnt down when you get to it, then you say, okay, we gotta rebuild, right? The Psalter in one hand and the sword in the other.
Well, I think your presbytery did exactly what's supposed to be done. I think a lot of other presbyteries did as well, which is saying, okay, let's pull out the book of ordination. And what that means is we're taking responsibility for what happened. Like we are taking something we have done has allowed something to happen. And so we're taking responsibility for it. And we're going to fix it. And I, just like a father who gets rebuked for his kids being disobedient or acting a certain way or not being godly. He's like, well, there's something going on in my house. I'm going to fix it. I promise you that. Right. And it's like, and when you say that, it's like, okay, you go do your thing, Dad. Trust you. You know what to do.
And I think
you got
there's
it.
And there's also there's a jurisdiction issue too, where you say the first thing you have to do is look around at your closest jurisdiction and say, are we in order right here? Right. I can't run off and fix General Assembly.
That's
without saying, okay, wait, how's my presbytery doing? I can't run off and fix presbytery without saying, okay, how's my church doing? I can't fix my church without saying, okay, how's my family doing? And I can't fix my family without starting and saying, like, how's my spiritual life? Right? How am I doing with the Lord? Am I, I had a very, very strong conviction during the confession of sin this last Sunday about just trusting in wealth. Lord, am I just because I've been worrying a lot, nervous a lot, and so it's confessing my worry, and then just convicted, oh my gosh, I think I am, even though I don't have wealth, I think I'm trusting in it. Like these things would go away if I was making a bit more money, if I, and so confessing that, and the confession is, Lord, forgive me for that, and remind me that I know and truly believe that even if God took everything, I would still praise him, right? So that verse in Job and Ecclesiastes, Lord, though you slay me, I will praise you. So that was how I ended my confession. Lord, I know this is actually true. And then crashed the car and got robbed. And there's absolutely a connection between the digging work that the Spirit is doing in my heart during the confession of sin and the assurance of pardon, and the testing this week. How are you going to respond to the car being taken? How are you going to respond to being uselessly robbed, right? Twice in 2 weeks, uselessly robbed. They took one crutch. I had crutches in the back of my truck, and they took one. They broke the window and took a single crutch. They didn't even take the pair of crutches. Like, what?
I would have given you both of them. You didn't just have to have one.
I would have taken you. I would. Yeah, you're like, this is not. they didn't steal anything of mine of value. They just, so you look at it and say, okay, Lord, I confessed truly my trust in wealth, and that I will praise you no matter what. And so I know that this is an opportunity to say, okay, Lord, I'm praising you in spite of the fact that this is you're just taking stuff. So, I mean, there's different ways of, and I know that that's the only way to really dig in. If you say, okay, Lord, I want my family to be right and to be a blessing to the church. I want my church to be right, be a blessing to the presbytery. I want my presbytery to be right, be a blessing to the denomination to be right, be a blessing to Christendom as a whole, Christendom to be right, to be a blessing to, be a blessing to the nation to be right, be a blessing to the world. That you got to start with your jurisdiction, which is my own greedy heart that's trusting in wealth. So,
It's always, one of the things I really enjoy about having these conversations with you, Jason, is that somehow, almost every conversation, the chiasm fits. There's no way I would have thought when we started talking and you getting into a car accident and getting robbed was going to somehow connect to egalitarianism, ontological economic realities, and an egalitarian economy and secular economy, and then to the PCA beating out homosexuality, and then come back to the fact that you got in a car accident and stolen iPods. I couldn't write that story. And so many times I've seen God write that story on this show over and over and over again. The chiasm just happens. I always wait for it.
Right.
And I just like, oh, it's happening.
It's coming.
Living in the moment.
Yeah. It's coming back around. It's kind of world we live in.
Yeah. If people want to read your egalitarian, what is it a part in the book, or is it introduction or epilogue? What was
it was intended to be the appendix to a book that I was writing on the cross. So on how the cross reshapes reality. So I'd been working on that book.
Wait, what? We haven't had that conversation yet, have we?
No. So it's
reshapes reality.
It was called. I think it was going to be called Jesus the Curse Breaker, something like that, and how understanding that how the covenant shape, that reality being covenant shaped, means that the work of Adam and the work of the second Adam actually are cosmological acts. So I was working on this book. It's basically, I'd basically done all the research and it is all ready to write. But this was the second appendix. And then, I got spinal meningitis and I never finished it.
Oh, so the reason I was bringing that up is because you actually shared it inside of the app on the Knox Unplugged comments. You actually shared that document there. And if anybody wants to read it, which I recommend everybody goes and reads it, that it was really good. And it was kind of really the basis and foundation of everything we were talking about here. So I just want to encourage everybody to go read that. And I don't know if we said this on the show before, but this last Christmas, I think I had people send you an email. Thank you for Knox Unplugged. So many emails. I was overwhelmed at the audience that we have, and I don't take it for granted. I'm just in here talking to you about stuff that I need help with, but I just don't take for granted, and I'm so grateful. Thank you all for sending those emails in. It was so encouraging. I don't know about, I was super really encouraged. They weren't even to me. I was just encouraged by everybody and how much of a blessing that it was to a wide variety of people from different backgrounds and cultures. It was just huge. And I just want to say thank you guys for listening. And we're trying to figure out how to be more of a blessing to our audience. We're trying to think of things to do that can build people up with what Knox Unplugged is. And so going to the app and getting that is which one of the writings. I wanted to let you know, Jason, this is going to be a smack and a high praise. I really enjoy your writing. I don't like your titles, but I love your writing. It's funny. I was like, man, he should have gave this. The only time I really like is No One Doubts a Belly Laugh. That's the one I'm like, that's deep. Everything else is like,
Yeah.
it's kind of nose. There's like, I think you've put so much into the book that by the time you're ready for the title, it's like, people will read it. It's good.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
No, it is true. I don't always.
What's Mr. Confession of Funk? Like, what kind of title is that? Like, what's Mr. Confession of Funk? It was a great podcast too. It was a great podcast.
But yeah, I'm not good at finding the entry point. That's why these conversations take 2 hours, is because I'm not good at finding the entry point.
No, that's not true. Well, you might not be good at finding the entry point, but they take 2 hours because I need a lot of help. I think I'm just the entry point, and you're like, well, this is a mess, and let me put some things in place in here. And it takes 2 hours to get me to understand. And it takes 2 hours because this is really how real dialogue happens. This is, for us, this is, for me, I learn like this. I need that kind of conversation to take place where I can say, wait, break that down. How does that make sense? Everything we talked about was in motion. And I think a lot of times people have didactic conversations that don't have the application tucked inside of the teaching. Where for us, when we're having Knox Unplugged, I think it works for a lot of people because they have a lot of theology, but then applying it directly to the situation with a cosmological worldview those things are happening simultaneously when we talk, because that's the kind of conversation that we have, which is why I'm like, I got to share this with people, because I think a lot of people are like me. They might have good education theologically, don't know how to apply it, don't understand the cosmological realities of it. And because when we're talking about J. Cole, we're not talking about something else. We're talking about cosmology. We're talking about a biblical economy. We're talking about all of the things that you would normally just have a straight didactic conversation about and kind of contained. Everything's touching. And that's why it takes 2 hours, is because everything is touching. We're trying to show, I think you're trying to show how it's all touching from one particular center point, right? A cosmological Christian worldview touches everything. Right.
Because
that's why it takes 2 hours.
Yeah, because reality is an interconnected, well, because reality is interconnected, and it all is interconnected by its relationship to Christ, right? Jesus is the integration point of it all, so it all fits together.
So, yeah, it's not your fault that it's 2 hours. Which, speaking of which, I got to go run and have lunch with my daughter. So,
fun, man.
Hey, maybe next time.
Are we telling people which book?
Yeah, but I kind of want to talk about how the cross reshapes reality. I'm interested in what that is.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we can. So maybe we talk about that next week.
Okay, sounds good.
What book did you want to read if you weren't going to didn't want to talk about that?
Well, I was thinking the preface to Paradise Lost. We just start there.
Oh, that'll work.
We were talking about hierarchy. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. Preface by C.S. Lewis, right?
Yeah. Preface to Paradise Lost by C.S. Lewis.
Let's do that. All right, Jason.